Today we're talking about how to overcome fear. Now, here's what I think about fear. There's two things. Fear, F-E-A-R. It's my least favorite F word, but I love to deal with fear for myself and for my clients. So what I want to talk about in this video, what we're going to learn about today is how to overcome fear and understanding where fear actually comes from. So F-E-A-R, forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. Now, here's what very few people actually know is that fear is, human beings are only born with two fears. So those two fears are fear of loud noises and a fear of falling. Why? They're a survival instinct. When you get afraid, our systems were created, millions, ultimately they call it, 2 million year old software, probably not that old. The oldest known human beings of our Homo sapiens were about, a couple 100,000 years old. So at least we're running on a couple 100,000-year-old software. So when a loud noise happens or, we stand next to a cliff edge and we're afraid to fall, that's because they're survival instincts. It forces the limbic system to kick in. The limbic system is a survival mechanism. And then that system is what will help us run away from a saber-toothed tiger or to step away from the ledge. Or if we hear a loud noise, it allows us to really focus on, getting away from whatever it is, a survival instinct. Every other fear that we have is conditioned. Every other fear. It's a conditioned response to fear. So how do we get conditioned to fear? Well, most of us are conditioned from a very young age to be afraid of things. People are afraid of taking a risk. People are afraid of traveling. People are afraid of not having friends. People are afraid of the unknown. People are afraid of money. People are afraid of everything that you can imagine. I certainly have a fear of spiders. Anyone who knows me knows that it's a totally irrational fear, yet it's a visceral fear. And over the years, I've worked on it in many different ways, and I've definitely gotten it into a better place. But sometimes if you're with me and I think I see a spider, or I do see a spider, or one gets on me, you can see that fear kicks in. But that spider, if I was living in Peru or Australia, maybe there's a rational fear of those spiders as a survival instinct, but not, in my life today, there really isn't that rational fear. It was a conditioned fear. And all of our fears ultimately are conditioned, and they're conditioned through either life experiences, or a lot of us get conditioned by our parents, by the communities in which we live in. So they may not even be our experience. I've met a lot of people who are afraid of dogs, for example. They never had a bad experience with dogs, but their mother was afraid of dogs. Maybe she had a bad experience. So our conditioned responses get passed down from us through genetics or epigenetics. If you study epigenetics, you know that, we're watching how DNA changes based on traumatic experiences that maybe our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, our ancestors had. So when we look at this conditioning around fear and we think about how can I overcome my fear? So a lot of my clients come to me because they have a fear around going out on their own. They want a different job or a different life. People want to leave a relationship, or they want to get into a relationship, and people, have conditioning around all kinds of things. So people are afraid to leave a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, guaranteed income job, right? To go out and risk not making enough money. That is a conditioned fear-based response based around, I don't know how to step outside of what I was told to do. This is what I was taught is how you make money. And I was taught that you can't make money in any other way. It's conditioning. But what if you could make money in another way, right? Because how do you actually know that you can't? And if you look around for examples of all the people who've created their dreams and were able to be massively successful, there's tons of those examples. But what happens when the limbic system gets involved? The limbic system is designed to look for fear. It is designed to look for danger so that we can avoid it to keep ourselves safe. The more fear-based we get, so when COVID-19 happened, fear spread faster than the disease, and people became insanely afraid of each other, we became horrifyingly afraid of getting any kind of cold or flu. And, COVID-19 is a serious, series of disease and communicable disease that was spreading. But what was spreading even more is how afraid we became of each other, how afraid we became. We left people out on cruise ships. Nobody would take them in. I remember thinking at that time, is this what we're going to become? Because fear gives us such this empowered or disempowered grip, and we lose our power in that. So if we want to look at fear becomes irrational when it is not based on our actual survival. Now, in COVID-19, what was triggered for people was the fear of death and the fear of our own survival. Not just our own survival, but many of us with friends and family who have long-term illnesses or chronic illnesses or immunocompromised or things like this. So what happened? The pandemic triggered a fear within people that I could die or my friends or family could die if I'm not, in this way. So we ended up developing all kinds of things that has now created, as it's loosening its effect on the world and as it's turning into an endemic where it's less serious for the majority of people. What's happening now is people are so conditioned that we've now developed a fear. So this is a perfect example, since we've all lived through so much of this. How do we start getting back out there? How do we go after the job that, creating the career that we really want? How do we take a risk? How do we, step into the unknown? How do we face everything and rise? Well, the first step in that is to actually acknowledge and realize that if it's not a survival thing that you're up against, and even if it is a survival thing that you're up against, is that we have to actually find tools that allow us to turn off the limbic system, the fight or flight response, and allow ourselves to really step into a different place. I have a couple of things that I like to do. I like to ground into my body, feet on the ground, have some big deep breaths as we, work through this, because what happens when the limbic system takes us, it just runs out of control. You know how it feels. I know how it feels to be deeply afraid. I mean, I've been in business. I've had businesses fail. I failed more times than I care to admit sometimes or care to keep track of. And that can be really scary, starting over, starting again. It can be really scary when we're not sure where our paycheck is going to come from. It can be really scary believing in ourselves when we've spent most of our life not believing in ourselves. It can be really scary to try again when we failed something, weight loss programs, when we failed so many times. And these fears, when they get a grip on us, that's essentially what's happening, is your limbic brain is turning on, and then you're going into survival mode for things that are not actually creating an actual life or death situation for you. Different when they are, even though those can still be overcome, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the ones that we start to realize are conditioned, how do we actually overcome the fear, is ground into ourselves. We have to pull ourselves back and create tools to pull ourselves back from that limbic system. Some of my favorite ways are grounding, breathing exercises, hand-heart exercises, talking to myself. One of my mentors used to say, sometimes you got to stand up, you got to look yourself in the mirror, and you got to say, shut the fuck up, right? So this is sometimes what we have to do. We have to grab that bull by the horns, and we've got to get really good at that. We've got to get really good at, one, you have to understand where fear comes from, understand what's irrational about that fear, talk yourself through it, and do things to ground into your body and ground into your world and be able to walk yourself through it. I like to work with people on this because systemically it's irrational. And sometimes when it's irrational, we can't actually stop the process. We need somebody to actually help us stop the process for us. So yesterday I go on a hike, and I'm so used to hiking. I mean, I was terrified of heights. A couple of years ago, I went and I did this program, had to climb a telephone pole 50 feet, jump off of it. And it was one of the most life-changing experiences of my life. I managed to do it. I managed to get through it. It's a true survival thing. Even though I'm harnessed in, even though I'm not going to die, my brain is like, don't do it. Stop. It's like yelling at me. So it takes me like forever. I have this like 4.5 minute video. It's painful. And eventually I get my feet up on it, and then I enjoy the view, and then I actually have to jump. I mean, a whole process, and I had to overcome that fear. When I would go hiking, I couldn't even go to the edges. I would crawl on my belly to look down over a cliff edge. Went to the CN Tower and could not walk across the glass floor. My legs would just give out. I mean, I was coming up against this deep, this deep fear that was really overtaking me. And it is one of our survival fears. It's one of the only ones we're born with. So it makes sense, right? But now I can walk over things. I mean, I don't, I can climb things. I can jump off things. I can stand on top of buildings and look down. I can stand on cliff edges and look over. So I'm on a hike and a friend of mine is with me and she's like, oh my God, I can't go near the edge. So I'm telling her like, okay, we're going over to the edge. We managed to get her close enough that she felt pretty exhilarated by working through that fear. And ultimately, that's the answer of how do we overcome fear, is that we have to actually do the things that are going to help us overcome the fear. We've got to feel the fear and do it anyway. Now, in feeling the fear and doing it anyway, it's not about being reckless. It's not about being stupid. It's not about, going out there and taking stupid risks, saying, oh, I'm going to quit my job and just jump into this thing. I mean, you have to have plans. You have to put things in place. And I think that this is the ultimate thing that we have to do, is we have to face the thing that we want, acknowledge all of the belief systems that we have around it, look for anything that's irrational, work through those fears, ground ourselves in our power and in our body, and then be able to put the plans in place so that we can do the things that we need to do. And then we need to actually start doing it. We need to do it afraid. We need to be able to go out there and do things while we're scared. You don't have, people say, oh, we don't have the money. Well, get it. I don't have the time. We'll make it, because these are the things that ultimately will help you over this hump. So if you want to, maybe you have a full-time permanent job, but there's something in your heart that you really want to do. So what's the plan going to look like? How many years is it going to take? How much money do you need in the bank to be comfortable before you can do this? How much money do you need? What kind of a startup do you need? So you actually work through the plan. You don't just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to quit my job, and then go quit your job and do it. I mean, that works too. Sometimes the best way to figure out that you can fly is to jump. But I mean, I've done that, and I don't actually recommend unplanned leaps. Leaps of faith are far better when you've done the planning work underneath, so that you actually know who you are. So that when you jump, you don't pull the parachute too soon because you get afraid, or that the parachute doesn't get hooked on a tree branch and it looks like you jumped, but really you're just stuck, and you get stuck in those fear places. So fear is one of the most crippling things that people can go through. And it's the number one thing that really holds people back. I watch women every single day that I know that have incredible potential. Everyone I know, you're listening to this if you have incredible potential. If you have greatness inside of you, you're listening to this because many of us, all of us, even people doing it, are still doing it afraid. People are not scared. It's not that you're never going to be fearless or, totally unafraid to make choices and changes in your life. But the difference is, and what ultimately changes things, is that instead of forget everything and run, you face everything and rise, and you do that deep inner work inside of you to get grounded into yourself. You make the plans that are necessary. You get the mentors and the coaches and the people on your side. You have friends on your side who are cheering you on, who are clapping for you, who are showing up for you. And then you make the moves that you ultimately need to make so that you're actually doing the thing, because how fear is truly overcome is by doing the thing that you're afraid of and surviving it. So that is what I wanted you to learn today, is how to overcome fear. I would love to hear from you about what your biggest takeaway was. So leave me a comment. I would also love it if you would take a moment and share this video maybe on your social media. Just click the share button, share it with people you know. Someone I'm sure that you know is also dealing with crippling fear that they don't understand where it comes from, and understanding where it comes from makes a huge difference. So if you would take a moment and make sure that if you haven't subscribed, that you click subscribe to my channel, because I'm going to be posting a whole lot of videos. As I'm new to YouTube, I am really excited to be here, and I can't wait to share even more of this stuff. So let me know what your biggest takeaway was in the comments, and take a moment to subscribe, and take another moment to share this with your network. I can't wait